In life, you can never truly know what will happen, and deep inside the Shinjuku dungeon, a party stands ready for a fight, where a red-haired warrior screams out a single desperate name, Harashige, as a young archer beside her cries out for him too, while he just stares up at the imposing silhouette of his former coworker, pointing a finger as his words carry a heavy, undeniable truth, a truth that began just 1 month earlier. When he was an ordinary office worker, completely buried in endless overtime, with no bonus, no raise, and absolutely no future to speak of. And after 16 long years of service, Harashige Yamamoto is unceremoniously fired, letting out a deep sigh of utter despair, his eyes catching sight of the dungeon tower as he considers a brand new path, where this strange new world of explorers is explained to the audience. How 50 years ago ordinary buildings suddenly became monster-filled dungeons, and those brave enough to challenge them came to be called explorers. With everyone entering for their own personal reasons, be it power, wealth, or freedom, while a cheerful advertisement promises that absolutely anyone can become an explorer, though the fine print warns that injury and death are your own sole responsibility. And as this orientation video concludes, the instructor asks if there are any questions. Harashige is the only one in the room who noticed the grim capitalized warning, but the instructor simply ignores his question, leading the group toward registration, where they must each touch a strange stone and state their name and age. So he places his hand upon the cool surface, stating his own identity, waiting for a moment, completely unsure of what is supposed to happen next, asking if that's all there is to it, but she just offers a mysterious smile, as the receptionist tries her best to be encouraging, leading him over to a large, imposing stone monolith, where Yamamoto speaks the required command status. And a glowing screen appears, a display that is visible only to him, while the receptionist warns him of one particularly crucial detail, that the most important thing for any explorer is their skills, these innate abilities that ultimately define an explorer's raw talent, and she says that even an older man like him has a chance at getting a great one, so he's told to read his newly acquired skills aloud for her. But Yamamoto hesitates for a moment, the pressure of the situation mounting, as his status reveals 2 skills: appraisal and world time. The receptionist's friendly face suddenly goes completely blank, her expression shifting from encouragement to one of unmistakable pity, explaining that appraisal is quite useful, but she mishears time as tame, and she bluntly declares that tame is one of the worst possible starting skills, as it only uses spirit power to summon an incredibly weak familiar, a useless drain on his energy with no real combat potential whatsoever. Before she trails off, realizing just how blunt she has been, and her subsequent words of encouragement now ring completely hollow, while all around them real powerful adventurers begin to fill the hall, and Yamamoto can only clutch his registration papers tightly, telling himself that he already knew this would be the outcome, that this was never meant to be a serious career path for him anyway, but his trembling hands betray his crushing, overwhelming disappointment, leaving him to stand alone, a man with seemingly no talent, watching as the younger, stronger adventurers confidently pass him by, until a few of them notice him walking directly toward them, and the crowd recognizes the famous party, the Absolute Knights. He takes a single firm step forward, as the legendary party walks past him, a massive monster head in tow, and the crowd murmurs about the strongest team heading out once again, but he possesses a skill that allows him to see their true hidden power, so he focuses his gaze, activating his appraisal skill, and the red-haired swordswoman suddenly stops in her tracks, as a wave of raw data washes over her profile, revealing her stats: Kakano Sakurako level 139, and he's completely stunned by their overwhelming, unbelievable abilities. So defeated, he turns and begins to walk away all alone, but Sakurako looks back over her shoulder, sensing something was off, and her teammate asks what seems to be bothering her, though she just brushes it off, saying it's probably nothing, yet still she can't quite shake the feeling of a strange presence nearby. While Yamamoto arrives at the overgrown and abandoned Nippori dungeon, remembering the receptionist's recommendation for absolute beginners, knowing his training will end once he successfully clears this place, but upon stepping inside, his eyes widen with a deep sense of unease, as the dark, oppressive hallway triggers a painful, buried memory, a flashback to his old boss screaming directly in his face, how he was forced to work all night long because of a single minor mistake, while his coworkers could only offer him quiet, pitying whispers. And his expression becomes grim, his features hardening with determination, as he shakes off the lingering thoughts of his miserable old life, because he's an explorer now ready for a real adventure. So he steps deeper into the dark and winding cavern, finding the passage to be dark and dangerously uneven, but he quickly realizes he's not alone in the shadows, when a strange squishing sound suddenly catches his attention, and he turns to find a tiny, harmless-looking slime, staring at it in utter comical disbelief, realizing this is his very first monster encounter. He decides it's time to use one of his skills, and the appraisal window opens before his eyes, showing it's just a level 1 slime, weak but possessing its own skills, and he thinks for a moment that he understands the situation. But the slime suddenly attacks without any warning, and he can only watch as the watery projectile flies through the air before it slams directly into the center of his chest, the surprising force of the blow throwing him off his feet, and he crashes hard to the ground, completely winded. So he quickly checks his own status to see the damage, Learning that Yamamoto Harushig has taken 8 points of damage, while the slime prepares to launch another strike, and Yamamoto realizes he's in very real danger, scrambling desperately behind a rock for some cover. Knowing his only hope now lies in his other skill, when a sudden desperate realization hits him, and he understands that this method is a desperate all-or-nothing gamble. As another watery projectile shoots forward toward him, he throws up a hand not to block it, but to unleash his power with a single powerful word, tame. And now inside the cave he gasps for air, as a small slime creature sits obediently before him, its status now perfectly clear awaiting command. His eyes widen in complete and total disbelief as he processes the impossible message on his screen, and a slow triumphant smile spreads across his face because it actually worked. But the immense effort nearly makes him collapse to the ground, and he gags feeling the skill's painful backlash course through him, as his status screen reveals the massive energy cost it required. Though he immediately compares this pain to his old soul-crushing office job and decides this is nothing he can absolutely handle this, his resolve hardening into a cold, determined stare, remembering he heard that weak monsters don't typically obey commands, so he gives a simple direct order jump, and the slime leaps into the air almost instantly, bouncing obediently up and down on the cavern floor, making him realize his skill might be something truly special. So he tells the little creature that it can stop now, as a brand new strategy begins to form in his mind, and he draws a small knife ready for the next step, where twin beams of energy tear through the darkened air, and the man in the suit watches the chaos calmly, as a slime creature lunges forward to attack him, only to be blasted back by a powerful ring of force, leaving the creature to float in the air stunned and weakened. So he raises a knife to deliver the final blow, leaping forward and striking with practiced precision, causing the slimes to burst into nothingness. And he catches his breath for a moment, the battle finally won, confirming his 5th kill of the day, feeling a rush of accomplishment. Because with this method he knows he can actually fight, and a status screen reveals his name, Yamamoto, while a lone friendly slime bounces happily beside him, and Yamamoto watches it, still completely bewildered by it all, before the scene shifts to a normal, sterile office building, a flashback to his old life buried under mountains of work, where he stares blankly at his computer monitor, trapped in the endless repetitive cycle of his corporate job. And back in the present, the little slime looks up at him sadly. So Yamamoto crouches down, his curiosity piqued, reaching out a hand to the small gelatinous creature, and realizing with a start that he's just gained his very first subordinate. And with this newfound resolve, Yamamoto stands up straight, deciding to push forward deeper into the darkness, his destination a derelict, overgrown building in the distance. As Yamamoto finally emerges from the dungeon's exit, a woman in a suit rushes toward him, frantically calling his name, and she arrives at his side completely out of breath, scolding him for not reporting back to the guild immediately, before her eyes widen in utter shock, as she asks if he was hunting monsters this entire time, telling him he's been inside the dungeon for over 15 hours, but he just shrugs, saying he lost track of the time, and she can't believe he was able to hunt for that long without a break. So he explains that it's much more fun than his old endless job, which leaves the poor woman completely speechless, and she asks if he at least managed to level up at all. So he pulls out his status board to check his progress, and the screen shows he's already reached level 8, though he plays it down, saying it's slow progress for an old guy like him. But her jaw drops 8 levels in a single day, and she tells him that kind of growth is completely unheard of, making Yamamoto begin to realize his pace might be abnormal. So she quickly dismisses him, his report now confirmed, and he gives a polite bow before turning to leave, while she just watches him go, her mind racing with questions, wondering just who this man Yamamoto Harushig really is. And on the train ride home he clutches his bag tightly, thinking to himself how much fun today actually was, and for the first time in years he's genuinely excited for what tomorrow brings, his eyes widening at the very thought of tomorrow, when his days used to be a miserable blur of crowded trains and endless hours spent just staring at a computer screen, before collapsing into bed surrounded by takeout trash. And he admits to himself he never used to think about the future, but now he can't help but wonder what the next day holds, gripping his bag with a new sense of anticipation, as a new kind of excitement fills his entire being, before the scene shifts back to a familiar office building, where a boss berates a female colleague over her work, and she just stands there silently taking the verbal abuse, while from his desk, a man named Yamamoto watches the scene unfold, knowing he can't just sit by and do nothing at all, so he nervously offers to help her out with the project. But the boss immediately turns on him, screaming his name, and Yamamoto freezes under the vicious verbal assault, while a man with a white ponytail stands alone in the background, and Yamamoto jolts awake in a cold, terrified sweat, realizing it was just another nightmare of his past life. So he throws open the curtains, his face filled with determination, because today he will face a brand new world. Standing at the entrance to the Shinjuku dungeon, where inside a monster snarls ready to attack, and a young adventurer finds himself cornered by 2 goblins, quickly reaching for his weapon to defend himself. But now surrounded by goblins, Yamamoto parries 2 blades at once, his eyes sharp and focused, his knife dripping with monster essence, when from behind another goblin leaps for a surprise attack, but he pivots instantly, driving his blade straight through the creature, And with a quick glance back, he allows himself a satisfied smile. As his slime companions cheer him on with happy little squeaks, but Yamamoto's focus quickly returns knowing the battle isn't over yet, and he steels himself for the next wave of monsters. And on the next day, his first real exploration is finally complete, when a receptionist screams, pointing at him in absolute shock, as Yamamoto stands in the middle of the guild hall holding a slime, and she immediately scolds him for bringing a monster out into the open, asking at the counter if the taming skill can be undone. But he panics, admitting he doesn't know how any of this really works, and the receptionist listens to his explanation, her expression thoughtful. So Yamamoto asks her why it's such a big deal anyway, and a rule is explained that using skills outside of dungeons is strictly forbidden, but Yamamoto insists that he was never detected by any sensors, and she considers his impossible growth rate and his strange misidentified skill, thinking to herself that this man is definitely not normal, as she wrestles with the difficult decision of whether or not to report him. But suddenly she smiles and says it's okay just for now, clarifying the rule that the skill is forbidden, not the monster itself, and she makes her choice, declaring her trust in Yamamoto, but she warns him to keep the slime hidden whenever he's in public, before a new proposition catches him completely off guard, as he's asked to challenge the much more dangerous Shinjuku dungeon, an overgrown ruin that serves as a true test for explorers. And inside, Yamamoto finds himself facing a massive goblin horde, but he soon stands victorious over a pile of defeated bodies, taking a moment to check his stats after the grueling fight. As the defeated monsters begin to decay around him, their forms melting away into a white gooey substance, and Yamamoto uses his appraisal skill on the strange remains, finding the only loot is a single goblin tooth worth very little money, so he lets out a long, frustrated breath. Because this wasn't the exciting new life he had envisioned. He wanted to be free from the misery of his old job, but the grim reality of this world is quickly setting in, and this meager prize is all he has to show for his EFFORTS, so he reluctantly picks up the slimy, worthless tooth, knowing that to live he still needs to earn money somehow, when suddenly a familiar shape bounces cheerfully toward him, and he sees his 3 slimes have come to help him clean up, praising them for their excellent and helpful teamwork. And the slimes look proud of themselves, ready for more action, though he knows he can't possibly handle any more than 3 at once, as they fought bravely alongside him through all the chaos. So he takes a moment to recover his strength, and with his small but loyal team he presses forward, checking his meager earnings from the day's hunt. Realizing it's not quite enough, he needs to find more, when a dark, crumbling hole in the wall catches his eye, and he smirks, thinking it looks like a classic treasure spot, so he sends his slime companion Sakurako to scout ahead. And the little creature hops bravely into the darkness, while he waits outside, figuring the place is likely empty anyway, the slime bouncing deeper and deeper into the dark cave, when suddenly a large shadow lunges from the blackness, and a sudden noise from inside makes him jolt with alarm, as he hears a desperate cry for Sakurako. So he rushes into the cave, his heart pounding with panic, and inside he finds a group of thugs holding a young girl captive, their pierced leader glaring at him for the interruption, while the terrified girl's eyes plead with him for help, and our guy freezes, caught completely and utterly off guard, stammering as he asks what they think they are doing, but the leader just taunts him, asking if he's some kind of ally of justice, so he focuses his mind, activating his appraisal skill, and a status window reveals the leader's name, date Takuma, level 27, a power gap that is immense. This man is incredibly strong, and Takuma immediately realizes he's being scanned by a skill. So he grinds his foot cruelly on the flat and helpless slime, and our boy's jaw tightens with a surge of pure rage as Takuma mocks him for relying on such a weak, pathetic creature, and the blonde villain continues to mock him, while his men hold the young girl captive, and her eyes burn with a fierce, unbroken defiance, our boy's jaw clenching so hard it hurts, as a cold, unfamiliar fury begins to take over, and a painful memory suddenly surfaces in his mind, making him remember his old, powerless office life. A time filled with helpless, bitter regret, as a past failure flashes vividly before his eyes, and the captive girl's tearful eyes meet his own, making him look down, lost in a moment of thought. But he's not that powerless man anymore, and his hand tightens slowly into a determined fist, because this time he declares he will help her, his resolve now absolute and unwavering. But the villain has clearly had enough of this, swinging his massive weapon, intending to kill. Yet our hero stands his ground without flinching, his determined gaze never wavering for an instant, when suddenly his hand begins to glow with a strange power, and he stares at the surging, unfamiliar energy before unleashing his true skill. Time, and the captive girl is completely stunned, while the other thugs can't believe what they're seeing, as he stops the massive weapon with just one hand, giving a final chilling command to them all, get out, and a strange power activates throughout the cave, causing a nearby wild slime to suddenly pop. And the other 2 captors burst out laughing at the display, while the axe wielder scoffs at the failed skill, ready to strike again. But his heavy axe clatters uselessly to the ground, and his allies stare at him completely confused, as the axe wielder stands frozen and eerily silent, his partners unable to understand what's happening, and then he mutters a single robotic phrase. Go straight home, he says, as if a command is being executed, and his foot moves against his own will, as he turns and walks away, repeating the strange order. And the others chase after their entranced friend in a panic, So with them finally gone, he unties the captured girl, offering her a small healing potion, which she quickly drinks down in a single gulp, and he stares at his own hand stunned by his incredible power, clenching his fist as he realizes this isn't normal taming at all, before he turns to check on the girl. And she thanks him, introducing herself as a Sasaki Makoto, so he asks if she's still in pain, but she says she's fine. And he smiles, genuinely relieved that she's okay. But she insists on paying him back for the expensive potion, and a quiet, awkward moment passes between the two survivors, as he says he simply wanted to help, that's all, and the girl looks at him completely stunned by his kindness, while his slimes insist the potion was far too generous, and he tries to leave, just glad that she's safe now, but she grabs his sleeve, stopping him from walking away, asking him to please form a party with her, and he's completely confused by the sudden request. As they walk together through the rocky, desolate wasteland, she repeats her plea, this time more urgently than before, but he still doesn't understand why she would ask him, and they arrive at the ruined entrance of the Shinjuku dungeon, where she formally introduces herself as Asaki Makoto, and he bows in return, stating his name is Yamamoto Harashige, before Makoto explains that her previous party members were nothing but cruel newbie hunters. Thugs who prey on inexperienced, trusting explorers, luring them into a party, taking their gear and leaving them behind to die, and Yamamoto's expression hardens at the story, as she admits she was fooled by a high-paying job offer, so he asks why she would ever trust him after an experience like that, and the thought of him being a villain seems to shock her, making her laugh with relief, which catches him off guard. So Yamamoto confesses that he's a total beginner himself, and Makoto begins to explain the basics of a party system. The idea of shared experience points being completely new to him, as a diagram explains the party's EXP distribution system, and how even non-participants can gain the full reward, the man listening intently to her surprising proposal. As the young archer bows low, admitting she has no money to offer, but she'll hunt daily if he just lets her party up for the EXP, and he thinks her offer sounds far too good to be true, telling her that thanks are completely unnecessary, but she grabs him again, insisting on repaying his kindness. And her sheer intensity makes him reconsider his refusal. As she waits for his answer, her eyes wide with desperate hope, and he finally speaks. There's one condition, that they will hunt together and split all the items they find evenly, and she asks if the man Yamamoto is absolutely sure, eagerly promising to do anything he asks of her, while elsewhere two adventurers are lost deep in a dungeon, and a massive high-level monster blocks their only path, leaving the two to do nothing but scream and run for their lives. And on the next day at the Shinjuku dungeon, Yamamoto is left completely and utterly speechless, because the young archer has made him a lunch box, and this simple kind gesture makes him burst into tears, as no one has shown him such genuine kindness in years, so he tearfully accepts the gift, promising to treasure it. And as they walk, he reveals he was recently laid off from his job, while she explains her own reason, that her mother is very sick, and Asuka scolds herself for needing so much help. But Yamamoto is suddenly overcome with a wave of emotion. So she changes the subject, asking what his current level is, and he hesitates for a moment, checking his status, as the screen flashes into view before them, showing he's reached level 19 in just 1 week, and she reveals her own slow, painful progress in comparison. But determined, she vows that she will try even harder, and 3 hours later their hunt is well underway, as she checks her screen already at level 16, and Yamamoto points to his 3 slimes, hinting at the cause. When a sudden realization finally dawns on her, and she asks if he's somehow sharing the slime's experience points, and a diagram explains his incredible 4 times growth multiplier, and how as a party member she gets the full benefit as well, leaving her frustrated, feeling now even more indebted to him, when a sudden shout pierces the dungeon's silence, and a goblin lunges from the shadows toward her, the surprise attack knocking her completely off balance, and her bow clatters loudly to the stone floor. But Yamamoto intercepts the attack, his blade a silver flash, and she watches stunned by his incredible speed, as the threat is gone, and he asks if she's okay, offering a hand to help her up, and he pulls her safely back to her feet. He suggested that perhaps they should call it a day, but she insisted that she was perfectly okay to continue, though she did agree they should always prioritize their safety, apologizing for having caused him so much trouble, and then calling out to the man she knew as a Suzaki. When suddenly, a deep and menacing rumble began to shake the entire cavern, making a Suzaki realize that something was now very, very close, just as a lone figure crawled out from a dark, narrow passage, a wounded man desperately begging them for help, before a massive, monstrous foot slammed down right behind him, and a single horrifying eye snapped wide open, revealing a cyclops that now towered over them all. They were completely shocked to see a cyclops this deep within the dungeon, and a Suzaki immediately grabbed the survivor, yelling for everyone to run, while she questioned if she could really just be saved yet again, as this terrible beast stared them down with a hungry gaze, and her resolve hardened, knowing that this time she had to fight, her hand tightening its grip on the familiar wood of her bow, as she took a stand, telling him to take the man and escape without her, while a Suzaki could only watch in horror as she prepared to face it alone. She drew the string back taut, taking careful aim at the creature, just as this monster raised its enormous hand preparing to strike. But she managed to dodge the crushing blow at the last second, pivoting on her heel and lining up another shot. her arrow flying true to strike the beast squarely in the shoulder. The archer knelt low, finding herself unable to get a clean shot, while her companion watched the beast approach, sweat beading on his brow, knowing deep down that they were in a truly desperate situation, with a hulking cyclops towering over them ready and willing to kill. And this young archer understood that it was all on her now. The monster raised its massive clawed hand once more, swinging it down in an arc meant to crush her completely, and in that split second her mind flashed back to a quiet prayer, to a time when she had to be strong for the sake of others, remembering the day she promised to care for her sick mother, vowing to her that she would handle absolutely everything. This was the very reason she chose such a dangerous path, recalling the day she first joined the ranks of the explorers. And the crushing, unforgettable weight of a past failure. As a single tear traced a path of regret down her cheek, but back in the present, Yamamoto suddenly moved to shield her, blocking the Cyclops' devastating strike with a giant sturdy shell, the creature's sharp claws shattering uselessly against its surface. Yamamoto strained under the immense, overwhelming pressure, before shoving the monster's arm back with a powerful roar, as a strange and unfamiliar energy began to gather around his hand, and he prepared to unleash a hidden power he kept in reserve. Yelling out the single word "time" as he touched the monster's hand, causing the entire Cyclops to freeze in place, caught in a stasis field, and Yamamoto panted, confirming its movement was completely stopped. The girl in the school uniform then called out to Suzaki, begging him for help, her voice filled with a raw desperation, and he set his jaw, making a difficult but necessary choice, as a hand gripped a bow ready for immediate action, and she took the weapon from him, quickly nocking an arrow. Her eyes narrowing with an intense and deadly focus, the arrow flew through the air, a silver streak aimed directly at the beast, striking the giant monster right in its single vulnerable eye, and the creature let out a final agonized roar before dissolving into smoke and dust, while she simply watched the threat disappear before her. Nearby, the exhausted Yamamoto finally collapsed, his energy spent, and she approached him, apologizing again for all the trouble. But he just looked up, his expression completely unreadable. While Suzaki looked down at the ground, filled with a sense of guilt, he told her that from now on he wanted to be able to rely on her, smiling as he said that they were a real party now, which caused her eyes to widen in genuine surprise, and she bowed her head respectfully and agreed. Elsewhere in a different place, a wall was covered in powerful gleaming weapons, where a red-haired swordswoman was being asked about her confidence, and she introduced herself to them as Sakurako, stating that only the strong survive regardless of the place. Before thanking someone for the blade and turning to leave, in a smoky workshop, a muscular woman took a long drag from her cigarette, sighing as she realized her best client would be gone for quite a while, as a new scene opened on the bustling Explorers Alley, a street completely packed with adventurers and eager merchants, where one vendor shouted, advertising his incredibly cheap potions, and another promised life-saving armor, but only for the right price. This was the guild's official sprawling commercial district, where a man arrived needing a new weapon after his had broken, and someone suddenly called out his name, Yamamoto. His companion, a young woman, had found a well-rated shop online, but she hesitated for a moment, comparing its prices to another store, insisting they buy from a proper shop and that she would help him choose. They approached a crowded weapons stall together, where a cheerful owner showed them a decent sword that was on sale, but the woman suggested a few different smaller daggers instead. And this whole shopping trip was already exhausting Yamamoto, so he told his companion he just needed a quick break, but when he looked up from his phone, she was gone, having been separated from her in the dense crowd. He tried to send her a text message but got no reply, so he decided to find a quiet place to rest and wait for her, when suddenly something strange happened to catch his eye. He glanced toward a narrow, unassuming side street, where a simple wooden sign pointed to a weapon and armor shop, and he peered down the dark, rather uninviting alley, deciding he might as well investigate on his own. And at the end of the path he found the hidden store. He peeked nervously into the dimly lit shop, seeing a woman inside who took a slow drag from her cigarette before he stepped into an armory completely filled with weapons, and the shopkeeper greeted him with a knowing, confident smile. Our boy was clearly intimidated by her presence, taking a hesitant, shuffling step forward into the room. And she got right in his face, asking him what he needed, a military-style dog tag hanging around her neck. He stammered something incoherent about being on a diet, and she quickly realized he was just incredibly shy, when suddenly she grabbed him by the front of his jacket, leaning in close to inspect him with a critical eye, before letting Gio, seemingly impressed by his physique. She then examined his hands, deducing his entire combat history, and he could only confirm her sharp, accurate analysis. So she asked for his name, since they had skipped the introductions. She was Anaguma Ayumu, a blacksmith and the owner of the shop, and he introduced himself as Yamamoto Harashige, a new explorer, which Ayumu found odd for a serious man like him to be an explorer, so she declared it was time for them to talk business. She led him down a flight of cold stone stairs, and Yamamoto realized he was just following orders again, while Ayumu wondered about this strange, knowledgeable man. As they entered the forge, where a burly blacksmith was at work, and she asked if he doubted that she could swing a hammer herself, the woman then led him down a long spiral staircase, and he was stunned that she somehow knew about his appraisal skill, but she just continued down, confident and completely unbothered. As her status appeared to him, Aguma Amu level 108, he was sweating profusely, completely shocked by her immense power, and she playfully teased him about her other hidden stats, which left our boy flustered, waving his hands frantically. A heavy reinforced door swung open at the bottom of the stairs, and she welcomed him to her personal private workshop, explaining that every weapon here is custom-made to order, and Aguma looked at him expectantly, waiting for a response. He was confused as to why she'd help a total newcomer like him, but a small knowing smile crossed her face as she revealed this shop was for special clients only, and he realized the storefront must be magically hidden from others. There was, she explained, only one condition to find this place: that the customer must possess a unique skill, and his own skill had made him a client the moment he entered. So now she asked him what he was going to do. He glanced around the impressive mastercrafted armory and pulled out all his savings, surprising her with his large budget. So Aguma decided it was time to praise him herself, and his status appeared before her: Yamamoto Harashige level 19. Her eyes immediately locked onto one specific unbelievable skill. It was a real, literal, unique skill, and with that a new chapter of his life began. An eye widened in complete and utter surprise, as the woman asked how long he'd been an explorer, and then she asked how his previous weapon was destroyed, a question and a powerful emotion surfacing at once. A unique skill called world domination was revealed on his status, and her second question was about his incredibly rapid growth, having reached level 19 in the span of just 1 month, while her third question concerned the broken weapon. A standard guild-issued knife meant to last for years. He must have swung it tens of thousands of times to break it, and an intense, almost predatory feeling gripped her, as she suddenly grabbed him from behind, declaring that she found him incredibly interesting. Her interest piqued by his vast unknown potential, she decided then and there not to charge him a single yen, and that she would personally forge his new weapon, so he could only stammer out his profound thanks. But she told him there was a condition to her generous offer: that she needed to know everything there was to know about him, demanding to examine every single intimate detail, which made him cry out in sheer unadulterated terror. Later, he was walking through a crowded market street, and his companion was shocked that he got a weapon for free, and though he looked completely worn out, he said he was okay. A man named Yamamoto was incredibly excited for his new weapon, arriving back at the Rokyukuma weapon shop, where inside a female blacksmith was sketching out new designs. Smirking to herself, knowing this project would be very interesting. Elsewhere, deep in the ruined Shinjuku dungeon, a blond man had pinned his subordinate to the floor, while his other lackeys watched on in absolute terror, as his boot ground down hard on the helpless man's face, and this leader asked what happened to the cyclops he had released. His men reported that the monster was defeated by some old man, which was not the answer he wanted to hear, so he applied even more pressure with his foot, making his subordinate cry out in terrible agony. Before a final brutal stomp ended the man's life, this blonde villain decided he'll have to go and greet this old man personally, and 3 days later, back at the weapon shop, the blacksmith was extremely pleased with her finished work, presenting to him a massive custom-forged greatsword, but Yamamoto struggled just to wield the incredibly heavy blade, shouting that it didn't feel right in his hands at all, so she showed him the weapon's 5-star stats on her phone. Back in the dungeon, Yamamoto and the schoolgirl faced 2 cyclops, and one of the massive beasts lunged forward to attack. But a different monster was suddenly struck down by a well-aimed arrow. As the schoolgirl stood ready with her bow drawn, 2 hulking one-eyed monsters were blocking their only path, so the young archer stood her ground, acting as the perfect bait, screaming out the signal for him to strike, and from a ledge high above, Yamamoto prepared his ambush, plunging his massive new sword downwards with absolutely devastating force. The archer complimented his incredible skill with the new weapon, but Yamamoto admitted he was still getting used to its immense power, and with their work now done, it was time to leave the dungeon, so they returned to the familiar surface world. At the guild, their collected monster parts were carefully appraised, and the receptionist calculated their impressive total earnings, leaving both Yamamoto and the archer completely shocked by the amount. As he remarked that one day's pay surpassed his old monthly salary, a brief flicker of unease crossed his face for a moment, before the receptionist asked Yamamoto to stay behind, and the archer looked on a little confused by the request, as the woman returned with the payment details. But her friendly expression had turned quite serious. She asked for an update on the thugs who had attacked the archer, triggering a flashback that showed the Black Wolf party capturing her, and while the guild was on alert, solid evidence was hard to find. So Yamamoto muttered that he wished they'd just turn themselves in, before he turned and walked out of the guild office, leaving the building with a heavy heart. A familiar face was waiting for him just outside. It was the archer girl calling out to Yamamoto, and he was caught off guard as she began to stammer, her hands gripping her bow nervously. She finally managed to ask him out for a meal, but then she panicked, quickly making up an excuse, leaving him completely baffled by her strange behavior. So she tried to rephrase it as just a simple get-together, and he agreed with a hopeful, reassuring smile. He offered to pay for everything, but she felt bad about it, though he insisted it was his way of properly thanking her, telling her to just relax and enjoy the meal. But from the shadows nearby, they were being watched. They arrived at a popular grilled meat restaurant, and inside their table was piled high with delicious food, but she noticed he was barely eating anything himself, so he joked that he was happy just watching her eat, and his easygoing manner seemed to surprise her. She visibly relaxed, stuffing her cheeks with grilled meat, and enthusiastically ordered even more food, which made him unable to help but smile at her incredible appetite, as she was clearly having the time of her life. He genuinely thanked her for this wonderful moment, but she dismissed his thanks, saying it wasn't about the meal, as a dark memory surfaced of her being held captive by thugs and a swordsman hauling their monstrous prize away. She told him that she was only here today because of him, giving all the credit for her rescue to Mr. Yamamoto. And to celebrate, they were sharing this grilled meal. So she apologized for any awkwardness, hoping they could get along. He smiled warmly, gladly accepting her offer of friendship, and the meal was a resounding, unqualified success. So they walked home together under the peaceful evening sky, and he was glad she was happy despite his now empty wallet. She worried about the cost of the dinner, but he insisted it was fine, playing it cool by saying it's an adult's duty to treat her. And Asaki beamed, accepting his kindness with a grateful heart. But their quiet walk was suddenly and violently interrupted. A man stepped out from the alley's deep darkness, wearing a smug grin and a worn leather jacket, and the swordsman asked who he was, as the stranger took a deliberate, menacing step forward, and suddenly they were surrounded by his entire crew, an entire gang now blocking their only escape route. The leader said he was here to thank Date for her interference, and Asaki recognized them, the very ones who attacked her before. Whispering their name in terror, the Black Wolf Pack. Their leader complained that Date had interfered with his business, and he invited them to come along for a special reward. But Date wasn't falling for such an obvious trap, and the man's face twisted into a chilling, cruel smile as he said he's done his research for today, calling out a name he'd learned, Yamamoto Harashige, and then another, a Suzaki Makoto. The leader of the infamous Black Wolf Pack introduced himself on a quiet night under a single flickering street lamp. As his pack escorted their two new captives away, Yamamoto's face tense, beads of sweat forming on his skin, and he and a Suzaki exchanged a worried, silent glance. Her hands gripped her weapon so tightly her knuckles turned white, and her expression hardened with a grim resolve. So Yamamoto turned to her, trying his best to be reassuring, standing firm, a human shield between her and the dangerous gang. He told her not to worry about a single thing, but her eyes were still wide with palpable fear as they arrived on the dungeon's dark third floor. And Yamamoto declared that he was their only target. Then there was a sudden, blinding flash of movement. As the leader lunged forward, his blade already drawn, his knife sparking loudly against Yamamoto's defensive guard. "You don't get to decide that," the leader snarled with contempt before he leaped back, readying another swift attack. A Suzaki cried out in fear as Yamamoto yelled appraisal, and the enemy's stats flashed into his view, level 46. Making Yamamoto stare, the power gap now terrifyingly clear. The swordsman's eyes narrowed, processing the dire situation, while the blonde leader offered him a simple choice: to die right here or to become his personal slave, offering to spare his life and his family in exchange for his loyalty. The leader savored the look of pure fear on his face, demanding that he give him an answer now, while the young archer watched on, absolutely terrified, and our boy lowered his head deep in thought. The leader laughed cruelly at his apparent hesitation. But then a hand was raised in quiet defiance, and the leader's mocking smile completely vanished. Our boy rejected the offer with a sudden surge of power, as a strange crackling energy erupted from his hand, and his ability Tame engulfed the entire area, freezing even his own allies who now awaited his orders. The entire enemy gang was instantly paralyzed by the skill, and the swordsman panted, the effort clearly draining him, but the blonde leader just smirked, unaffected, revealing that the Tame skill was completely useless on him. Our boy realized he was completely and utterly outmatched, and the archer knew in that moment that they were all doomed, as the leader promised to deal with him last, and then feed his entire family to the dungeon's monsters. He reached down for the greatsword that had fallen and claimed our boy's powerful weapon as his own. But the blonde man was forced to smile, a new understanding dawning, as our boy admitted this power was unexpectedly effective. The man's overbearing confidence completely shattered, and he took a nervous, stumbling step back, surrendering immediately, shouting that he had lost, offering anything if their lives would just be spared. Our boy then made a chilling and unexpected counteroffer, and the man saw a tiny, desperate glimmer of hope. But the command was simple and absolute: kneel. First, our boy said with a cold voice, "Stay still." Pure, unadulterated terror filled the man's eyes as he pulled back a fist ready to unleash his fury, ignoring a last desperate cry for him to wait. And the punch connected with brutal, sickening force. He drove the man's face directly into the ground, leaving the blonde man lying broken, gasping for air, while our boy stood over the devastating aftermath, and the schoolgirl watched completely and totally stunned. Dark droplets of blood stained the air around them, and he looked down, his face a cold, emotionless mask. As the man panicked, realizing his body wouldn't move, he clawed desperately at the dirt, trying to escape, screaming at his crew to help him get away. But his men simply stared, awaiting their new master's orders. Our boy slowly closed the distance between them, and the gang leader's face twisted in pure primal terror as he lay on the ground, begging pathetically for his life. The MC asked if he ever listened to his own victims' pleas, and the man could only sweat frozen in absolute fear as a single foot stepped forward with purpose. The MC gave another simple command, stand. The defeated leader shakily got back to his feet, changing his tune, offering to become a loyal subordinate, promising to give him money or anything else he wanted. And the MC listened, his expression completely unreadable. The man even offered to procure women for him, which caused a fist to clench tight with rage, and the MC drove that fist deep into the man's gut. The leader reeled back, spitting a mouthful of blood, and was told to never speak like that in front of Agasaki. While the schoolgirl watched the scene unfold from a distance, the man collapsed, insisting he wouldn't have actually killed anyone. So the MC spared his life but demanded a heavy price. The next morning, a new day began peacefully, as a news report flashed across a nearby screen, announcing the gang leader Kurakiri was arrested with his entire guild. While the MC and Agasaki ate breakfast together watching the broadcast, the MC revealed he gave Kurakiri 3 specific commands. First, never hurt anyone again, and second, turn yourselves in, and for the final command, he looked down at his own hand. They were forced to bow in apology until morning. In the present, Asaki apologized to him for everything, insisting that she never actually wanted revenge, she just remembered being so incredibly terrified, and Yamamoto listened with a calm, understanding expression. He recalled telling her not to worry about a thing, and because she trusted his words she had felt safe, so he was simply glad that she was okay. She thanked him once again for saving her, but he smiled, saying that she had helped him too, when suddenly a news report caught their eye. The nation's strongest party was clearing a high-level dungeon, and Yamamoto recognized the group the Absolute Knights. As a news anchor introduced their famous and charismatic leader, a reporter asked why they risked their lives so often, but the leader Kanzaki Lyon just chuckled at the question, claiming that he had no real interest in fame or glory, and that his only motivation was constant self-improvement. The outside world, he said, offers no real rest for the strong, declaring that this dungeon was just another test for him. But Asaki found the hero's whole attitude to be suspicious. Yamamoto silently judged the man on the screen, but on the dungeon's 90th floor, Lyon was secretly terrified. His status showing his health was now critical, as a hulking unknown monster loomed over him. Before this party stood a colossal 6-armed guardian, its 4 unblinking eyes staring down with cold, calculated intent, while a quick status check revealed its truly overwhelming power. Just as the monster swung down with an impossible blurring speed, causing a hand to tighten instinctively on a katana's hilt, and this brave swordswoman somehow managed to parry the massive blow, screaming at the knight Lyon to finally step up and fight. But he was already on the ground, his own sword completely shattered, and she could only glare back furious at his unforgivable cowardice, while the mage insisted that they absolutely must retreat now, though the swordswoman just yelled at Lyon again to get on his feet, as he couldn't believe they were actually being told to run away. So she ordered the mage to prepare an escape skill immediately, but Lyon was still frozen, kneeling there in utter defeat, refusing to flee because he was worried about their reputation. And she screamed back that there was no time for foolish pride. Then with a defiant cry she decided to charge in all alone, raising her blade high for what she knew would be one final strike, her attack connecting squarely with the monster's armored torso, but her katana simply shattered on the devastating impact, leaving her staring at the broken hilt in complete and utter shock, as she desperately called out to the teammates she thought she could trust, while Lyon just hung his head, still unable to bring himself to move, and the other man grabbed him, choosing to abandon her to her fate, leaving her behind to face the terrible beast all by herself. A lone swordswoman stepped forward, vowing to continue the fight, as she faced a towering, multi-armed demon of immense power, its 6 deadly blades crashing against hers in a chaotic blur, sending out a shockwave that threw her distant allies back, while the creature's many eyes watched her entirely unimpressed, moving far too fast as it suddenly caught her by the throat, but she twisted, using its own powerful body as leverage against it, her blade arcing down in a desperate last-ditch slash, unleashing a flurry of attacks in a special named technique, and as the smoke cleared from its armored hide, she landed softly, watching for any sign of significant damage, her eyes narrowing with the belief that she could actually win this. So she lunged forward once more for another decisive strike, driving her sword with every last ounce of her remaining strength, but the blade only sparked, failing to pierce its impenetrable skin, and her confidence shattered in that single horrifying instant, as the demon's counterattack came with blinding, incredible speed, a massive impact of energy engulfing the entire chamber, which left her disarmed and thrown aside like a broken doll. This proud warrior now lying on the ground, utterly and completely defeated, bruised but still defiant, vowing to one day repay this crushing debt, as smoke bombs suddenly covered a very hasty retreat, for the floor boss Ashura Ogre had defeated the strongest party. The story then shifts its focus to a new player, Azaki Makoto, cutting to a modern gleaming glass building in the city, where a guild receptionist smiled, her assessment now complete, handing a document to a certain swordsman and his young companion, but he glanced over, suddenly sensing a strange disturbance, as the entire room was frozen in a moment of shocked silence, and the receptionist began to whisper about some recent commotion, for a lone warrior was entering the hall, the crowd parting before her silent, determined approach. her face grim and stained from a hard-won brutal fight, and a massive object thudded heavily onto the ground before her, revealed to be a giant shattered helmet from a powerful beast, as she requested an immediate appraisal for her incredible trophy, prompting the swordsman to apologize for interrupting her business. But she just stared at him, her expression completely unreadable, so he nervously asked if she needed something from him, and she simply replied that it was nothing at all, telling the clerk she would just come back later, and as she left a wave of whispers followed in her wake, with the clerk naming her for them Kakano Sakurako, a former member of the legendary Absolute Knights, which made the swordsman taken aback by the word former. So the clerk explained she had quit after a terrible dungeon incident, and now she hunts unconquered bosses all by herself, which causes problems for everyone as it closes those dungeons, and other explorers have been filing numerous complaints about her, leaving him to mull over her name and her tragic story. A schoolgirl questioned his sudden, unexpected offer, as he invited her to a special hidden weapon shop, a place he said he trusted with all of his team's gear, and she finally seemed to understand his unspoken plan. So he led her down a secluded, quiet alleyway, where they arrived at a rustic old wooden storefront, its heavy door groaning open with a low ancient sound, and they stepped inside stunned by what they saw before them, as two women turned slowly to face them, the walls around them lined with countless weapons and sets of armor, and the shopkeeper immediately recognized the swordsman's companion, prompting the schoolgirl to nervously introduce herself, but the shopkeeper's gaze was sharp and intensely analytical. And a sudden heavy tension began to fill the air, making the girl grip her bow a little more tightly, explaining that this particular weapon was perfect for her, but the shopkeeper simply said that they would have to wait, their faces falling with a shared sense of disappointment, as the woman in the kimono stood silently before them, her stare feeling cold and incredibly intense, and the swordsman realized that something was terribly wrong, for the shop suddenly felt vast and unnervingly empty, and the woman's hand moved slowly towards her katana, just before a crushing aura exploded directly from her, pinning them in place completely and utterly paralyzed. The warrior and the archer entered a quiet workshop, where a woman in a kimono gave them a cold, piercing stare, until a smoking brawler told her to just leave them alone, leaving the pair standing confused by the sudden palpable tension. But the kimono swordswoman then apologized for her hostility, saying that she was only testing their potential, though a shadow crossed her face hiding a sly knowing smile. The brawler just sighed, telling her to go ahead, which surprised the young archer with its casualness, but she knew deep down there had to be a catch, and the swordswoman finally made her request, "Let me join your party," a proposal that left them both completely speechless. The scene then shifts away from the tense little shop, and the very next day they stand before the Shinjuku dungeon, where the warrior recalled her instructions to meet them here, believing her veteran skills would be a huge advantage for them. While the archer presented her powerful brand new bow, and he asked how the new weapon felt in her hands, to which she replied it was light and fit her perfectly, as they waited for their new mysterious ally to arrive. Hearing footsteps approach through the overgrown, crumbling ruins, and the swordsman appeared now dressed in full combat gear, her modern equipment catching them completely off guard, leaving the warrior visibly flustered by her striking new look, but she just smirked, calling it her battle outfit. And the armored man seemed even more flustered by her confident words, when suddenly a woman in a leather jacket appeared, and the schoolgirl questioned his choice of light armor, but the newcomer said armor is pointless if you just don't get hit, her sudden appearance shocking them both into silence, and she abruptly asked them to just call her Sakurako, then said she'll call the man Harashige and the girl Makoto, and Harashige the armored man hesitantly agreed to this, while Makoto the schoolgirl just looked on silently, until she got Harashige's attention with a soft tug on his sleeve, asking if she could call him Harushige-san instead, and he smiled warmly and said of course she could, her face lighting up with a brilliant happy smile, as she insisted he could just call her Makoto in return, and with their names finally exchanged the new team entered the dungeon. They were on the 31st floor, Harashige was level 48 and Makoto was 44. While their new leader said reaching the 40th floor would be easy, leaving Harashige and Makoto to look on with nervous anticipation, but she just gave a confident smirk, finding the challenge perfect, as something massive began to slither in the shadows up ahead, and a giant serpent emerged from the darkness blocking their path. So the swordswoman told the others to stand back, turning to face the enormous beast all by herself, saying, "Consider this my introduction," just as the serpent lunged, its jaws opened wide. A colossal serpent lunged forward with incredible speed, its slitted eye fixing intently on its chosen prey, but a swordswoman calmly blocked its descending fangs, making the beast's eye widen in utter shock, as she shoved the hilt of her sword deep into its jaw, and the massive snake thrashed wildly in the space behind her, while she muttered to herself that the move was a little too flashy, and with a final deafening crash the giant creature fell, her status screen appearing, Kakano Sakurako level 139, which left the two onlookers completely and totally speechless, as Sakurako turned back to them with a self-satisfied smirk, and the serpent's body began to dissolve into particles of light. She admitted that she's been curious about them for a while, so they asked why she left her old guild, the Absolute Knights, and more importantly why she had decided to join their party, and Sakurako smiled, seeming ready to finally answer, promising to explain everything as they walked. saying the reason she left was simple: her old party had no future. Which made the schoolgirl echo her words confused. Because their leader Kanzaki Lyon was nothing but a paper tiger, who only ever hunted weak monsters to artificially inflate his level, and when faced with a real challenging fight he would completely freeze. But Sakurako said she sensed something different in them, that they have the eyes of people who have truly fought for their lives, recalling the immense killing intent she felt from the other warrior, and the archer was surprised that he had reacted at all, as they stood before the red-haired swordswoman, who sensed the swordsman's power was something unusual, something far beyond mere levels or accumulated experience, while elsewhere an observer suspected he possessed a unique skill, and a confident smile played on the swordswoman's lips as she revealed her dream as a true martial artist, to conquer the 90th floor and fight ever stronger monsters, and to do that she needs allies who share the same ambitious goal, believing they can master the warrior's path together. And this was her reason for wanting to team up with them. As she stood before them awaiting their final reply, the incredible offer just hanging there in the air, but they awkwardly explained their goals are actually much smaller, and a long, deeply silent moment passed between them, leaving the powerful swordswoman utterly and completely shocked, as their simple, honest answer left her speechless. So she quickly tried to brush the whole thing off, deciding they should just move forward together for now, and she declared them a party anyway, leading the way deeper. While the swordsman and the archer looked completely drained, both of them feeling a deep and profound sense of unease, the new warrior stood ready, her katana held at her side, while the original pair raised their weapons looking uncertain, just as a colossal monster emerged on the 40th floor, and a dark sinister power erupted from the ground beneath it, prompting the swordsman to call out to his loyal slimes, his first slime creature answering the call immediately, the second one hardening its body with grim determination, and the third joining them in a single fluid instant, as they formed into twin blades for a new powerful monster, while the swordsman and archer attacked from its blind spot on its back, and she leaped clear just as he struck a devastating final blow, making the massive creature begin to crumble into dust. And from the shadows a new woman watched them intently, admitting to herself that their movements were impressive, and he thanked her exhausted from the difficult fight. But something about it had clearly bothered her. Her eyes fixed on his sad-looking tired slimes, and she asked why he doesn't just tame more powerful monsters, questioning him about his unique world tame skill, which he explained requires high precision and shared experience. So she asked if it would work on a human being, and he hesitated, admitting there are hidden dangerous details. First, the skill consumes a huge crippling amount of SP, and using it on a superior foe would completely paralyze him. While a blonde man added there's also a significant casting delay. A delay that grows exponentially with the target's overall power, and worst of all, the taming effect is absolutely permanent, though he smiled, saying it's fine for small simple creatures, as the men discussed their orders linked by a shared secret skill, and the redhead voiced her deep dislike for controlling others, but the swordsman urged them on, saying time was running out, and the two women stood together in the dark, silent cave, as she analyzed the skill's drawbacks, the cost, the lag, and the permanence. When a sudden chilling realization finally hit her, and she turned to the swordsman with a truly shocking request, leaving him and the schoolgirl completely and utterly stunned. The schoolgirl frantically tried to explain the skill's immense dangers, but he revealed that she doesn't actually know the whole truth, seeing a vision of a future foe, a terrifying four-armed warrior, and she insisted they must test their limits right now, declaring, "Not here, we return to the surface." As she wasn't worried at all about the skill's permanence, and he looked down, processing her strange and dangerous logic, his mind racing, connecting all the different pieces. Staring at his hand, the source of this unknown terrifying power, realizing he must master it before a true crisis finally hits. So the next day they entered a special dungeon training floor, and the redhead explained this is the only place to test skills freely, saying with resolve time to begin, as the swordsman Harashige was only level 48, while she was level 139, a truly massive power gap. And the test was set to measure the skill's cost, lag, and effectiveness. So Harashige raised his hand ready to begin the dangerous experiment. The swordsman held up 3 of his fingers, unleashing a powerful skill he called time, his energy plummeting, a heavy cost for using the ability, and he asked the woman if it had any noticeable effect, but she stood perfectly still, seemingly completely immune, and he watched her, a single bead of sweat on his face, as she wondered if the skill had simply failed to activate. But he said it should have worked in about 10 seconds, making her conclude his power isn't actually omnipotent, as she thought it was a skill that worked on absolutely anyone, and the schoolgirl seemed visibly relieved that it didn't work, explaining her fear of him controlling such a powerful person. But the woman was confused by her strange logic, and then she realized the skill's true name, absolute subjugation, though he assured the girl he would never abuse such a power. And the woman scoffed, refusing to ever be ordered around. And then there was a sudden sharp movement, as she lunged forward, grabbing him without warning, leaving the swordsman and the schoolgirl frozen in pure shock, and she held him tight, asking why he won't command her, begging him, "Please give me an order, my master," their shared horrified scream echoing throughout the chamber. The test of his world domination skill was finally over, and he realized there was a 1-minute lag due to the level gap. a terrifying delay between the activation and the order taking hold. As he understood his absolute subordination skill had finally activated, and he begged her to please stop calling him master, while the schoolgirl just found the whole situation incredibly strange, so they headed into the bustling Explorers Alley Market, where the ponytail warrior planned to find a curse-breaking item, explaining that it would restore his normal status, and he nervously asked about the price, learning the cost was absolutely astronomical. But she was confident they could earn the money back quickly. However, the first shop was completely sold out of the item, and the second shopkeeper had none in stock either, confirming it was an incredibly rare and valuable item, and no one knew when it would ever be restocked. So she bowed, deeply apologizing for her complete failure, but he tried to reassure her it wasn't her fault at all, leaving them stuck with no easy or obvious solution. She began to consider her limited options, but he realized there might be another way. And she offered to get it from the dungeon herself. Since the item was a rare drop from the dangerous 80th floor, so she asked to leave the party just temporarily, and he called out her name Sakurako to stop her, insisting that he was going to go with her, but she argued it was her responsibility as their leader. And then the schoolgirl declared that she was coming along too, the schoolgirl making her desperate, heartfelt plea, but her words were quickly and firmly dismissed, as the redhead stated the cold hard facts. That she couldn't possibly guarantee their safety down there. So the swordsman proposed a brand new plan, that they would all train together until they were ready, and the redhead asked if they were absolutely certain. And with that, a new pact was finally formed, as she laid out their mission: level up and reach floor 80. And as the new party departed, a figure watched from the shadows. It was the blonde-haired rival, a sinister plan already forming. But for now, the new team was full of determination and hope. Meanwhile, in the dungeon's deepest, darkest layer, twin demonic guards stood a silent, eternal watch, protecting a lone ruler who sat upon a massive stone throne, a girl with pigtails who sensed a new presence from the surface, and she beckoned to the one with the team domination skill. While a dungeon map revealed their goal, an item on the 80th floor. Back on the training floor, the real test began, their blades meeting with a blinding, deafening flash of light, the swordsman straining, holding his massive heavy weapon, while the redhead remained perfectly calm and composed. Their intense sparring match now fully underway. His eyes locked completely on his powerful opponent, as he planted his foot ready for another determined charge. A swordsman brought his massive blade down with all his might, while his red-haired companion watched an archer sprint past, that archer taking aim, pulling her bowstring taut, but the red-haired woman just smirked at the attempt, and easily sidestepped the incoming speeding arrow, making the young archer gasp in utter disbelief, as the swordsman leaped into the air for a powerful overhead strike, putting all of his considerable strength into the single blow. But the woman met his attack with her own slender blade, steel clashing against steel with a deafening ringing crash, and his sword slammed into the ground, a complete and total miss. As Kakano Sakurako LV-139 critiqued his slow, predictable attack, and Yamamoto Harashige now LV-79 accepted the harsh feedback, while a Sasaki Makoto now LV-70 was told her form was far too sloppy. Their intense, grueling training having lasted for many days. And Sakurako noted they both have good natural instincts, explaining that teamwork is everything against high-level monsters, but Harashige looked unsure if he was truly ready. So Sakurako announced their true objective, the 80th floor, where they must find an item to finally break her curse, though the others protested, saying it was far too dangerous. The next morning, Harashige waited in the central plaza, as Sakurako told them to gear up for the long journey ahead. And Harashige realized how difficult this new challenge would be. Staring at the sky, the goal echoing in his mind, the 80th floor, a man stood alone, having just been laid off from his job, and elsewhere a powerful party was introduced, led by the former top knight Sakurako. While the schoolgirl Makoto ran with purpose, fighting for her family, and her spiky-haired teammate felt the heavy weight of her resolve, deciding that he must be the one to protect her, as he awkwardly greeted her on the street, making Makoto explode in a flustered, embarrassed panic. And Sakurako watched their chaotic morning exchange with amusement, before the full party assembled ready to finally head out, their first stop being a local familiar weapon shop, where Sakurako was presented with a true masterpiece katana, the blacksmith noting its incredible 8-star rating and a unique skill, explaining the skill was granted by the wielder, not by the forge, and she offered a chance to test its mysterious, unknown power. But Sakurako refused, already feeling confident in the new blade, picturing it cleaving through a powerful, monstrous foe, and her teammates noticed the deadly intensity burning in her eyes, as the blacksmith watched the party prepare to leave, calling out to them just before they could go, saying it would be a huge loss if her best customers died, and she peeked out, telling them to please come back alive. So they smiled and promised her that they would, giving a final wave as the shop door closed behind them, and with preparations complete, their destination was set, the Shinjuku dungeon. The party stepping into the oppressive darkness of the dungeon entrance. They had once fought so well side by side, a team that was forged in the heat of battle, but now something in the air felt terribly wrong, as the team took a much-needed moment to rest before pushing deeper and deeper into the darkness, eventually making camp on the dungeon's 70th floor, where he asked the schoolgirl how she was feeling, and the ponytail girl noted the dungeon's heavy toll on them, making the schoolgirl apologize, feeling like she was a burden. a flicker of doubt appearing in her tired eyes. But he reassured them both their safety is the top priority, and his other companion agreed with their current pace, a quiet unspoken agreement shared by the warm fire, when suddenly a voice cut sharply through the silence, and another party emerged from the surrounding shadows, our boy recognizing the armored man leading them, and the ponytail girl demanded to know their purpose here, but the blonde man just smirked in a sinister way. As behind him, a mage began to cast a powerful spell, and magical chains erupted binding our hero in place, the schoolgirl finding herself trapped as well, while his other companion could only watch horrified, as the man Lyon said he was here for Sakurako, declaring that she will join his party once again, leaving the team captured and completely helpless. The night a man named Lyon attempted to propose a negotiation, but Sakurako immediately gave them a firm ultimatum, her gaze falling upon a man chained and seemingly helpless. And beside him, a young woman also held captive. While Sakurako sneered at how far the once-proud Lyon had fallen, though he insisted this was all for her own benefit, arguing that a strong woman like her deserved a man like him, offering a grand future of power and fame they could share together. But she simply scoffed, knowing he only ever cared for appearances. Yet Leon's face betrayed his true deep-seated fear, as his status screen revealed a high-level but critically damaged gear, and he tried to claim his last retreat was merely a supply issue, boasting that with full preparation he was truly the strongest, a claim the captive man listened to completely unimpressed, while even Leon's own party members looked on their faces filled with worry, as their stats showed they lacked both the time and the power for this fight, and the captive warned them that fighting now was nothing short of a death sentence, steeling himself, his body tensing as he prepared to act, just as Lyon demanded Sakurako's answer, choose the hostage or choose him. His desperate eyes locking onto his one and only target, before the captive finally spoke, calling the knight utterly shameless, an outburst that left Lyon visibly shocked and confused, as the man pointed out Leon's obvious fear after losing just one ally, challenging him, if you're so strong, fight the boss right now. Without her, what can you possibly do? The other adventurers could only watch frozen in their fear, while the blonde knight taunted his captive, asking, are you actually weak? Sakurako stood firm right beside the chained schoolgirl, as the captive Harashige begged to be the one to fight the boss for her, but the knight just roared for silence, pressing the cold steel of his sword against Harashige's stomach, the blade piercing cleanly into his side, causing Harashige's face to contort in a mask of pain, and the schoolgirl to scream out his name in terror. But the knight's attention snapped instantly to Sakurako, whose blade was now drawn, her eyes burning with a cold, unforgiving fury, which made the knight break out into a cold sweat, and she told him to wait, her voice as sharp as her sword, as they both looked down at the wounded man on the floor, who glared up at them asking, did you think that weak strike would kill me? Mocking the knight's feeble and pathetic power, which enraged the knight, who told him to shut his mouth, shoving the sword in even deeper, making Harashide's eyes widen in pure agony, as the knight screamed that he was only a hostage alive purely by his whim. His rant continuing as he claimed to be the strongest in the entire world, boasting that he could clear this dungeon with absolute ease, until a voice cut in saying simply, then prove it. It was Harashige challenging him to defeat the 90th floor boss all alone, and if he succeeded, Harashige would make Sakurako back down. So the young knight volunteered, declaring he would face the Ashura ogre, a suicidal mission that Harashige knew was completely impossible. A foot stomped the ground with furious certainty, his eyes widening in shock at the knight's foolishness. But Lyon refused to listen, determined to prove his strength alone, ordering another man to lead his party forward. And so the trio ventured into the dark, ominous hall, leaving Harashige behind struggling against his chains, completely immobilized on the cold stone floor, until a new figure appeared, a woman with a katana, and his chains were broken as he thanked his rescuer Sakurako, while the schoolgirl rushed to his side frantic with worry. And Sakurako scolded him for being so incredibly reckless, as the schoolgirl realized his plan, that he let them leave him behind, and he explained it was the only way to avoid a much bigger fight, a reason Sakurako listened to her expression carefully hidden, saying the only cost was a few potions, but she argued that he couldn't carry all the risk alone, a point the schoolgirl agreed with, reminding him of his own words, that everyone's safety had to include his own. And the two women stared him down, waiting for his answer, until he finally relented, admitting his mistake, saying that as their leader it was his job to protect them, and telling them he was proud to do it, his earnest words flustering Sakurako completely, triggering a memory of a promise he made to protect his sister, and Sakurako watched him with a strange, knowing look, though Harashige remained confused by her true identity, worrying his words might somehow drive her away, but Mashiro vowed to fight with all of her strength. And Sakurako declared that her place was right here with them, a statement that made a wave of relief wash over Harashige, as the newly formed team agreed to rest for the night, knowing full well the dungeon's guardians never sleep. The next day the trio stood united once more, pushing deeper into the labyrinth, finally reaching the 89th floor, where a chest revealed a rare and valuable orichalcum crystal, though it was still not the curse-breaking item they so desperately needed, so they pressed onward, searching for another chest, through stone corridors that seemed to stretch on forever, until Harashige considered turning back for now, suggesting they take just a short break, But Sakurako warned him that this floor was not safe, as their exhaustion was clearly starting to show, and he finally agreed that they needed to rest properly, making camp in the cold and desolate stone halls, where Sakurako reminded them they've still profited from the day, and Harashide said they could regroup and return even stronger, but she raised a critical point they hadn't considered. That if another team clears the dungeon first it all resets. Leather-clad woman scoffed at Lyon's chances of success, knowing the Ashirayaka was a truly terrifying threat, but she was also confident she could have won the fight alone, while elsewhere a battered Lyon bitterly regretted his party's failure. The woman clenched her fists in pure frustration, thinking she never needed his help to begin with, when suddenly a piercing scream echoed down the long corridor. A voice they recognized instantly, it was Lyon. The man in the tracksuit Harashide tensed up immediately, rising to his feet with grim resolve etched on his face. But she stepped in his way, demanding to know what his plan was, reminding him they had no obligation to help that man. The three of them sitting around their small flickering camp, as Harashide explained a decision he had made a long time ago, that as an explorer he only does what he wants to do, and he has no duty whatsoever to save Kanzaki Lyon, but abandoning someone in need is something he refuses to do. A conviction that took the two women completely by surprise, and he told them to wait here, that he would handle this alone. But the young archer Sakurako spoke up against it, declaring that since he had saved her she would now help him, and the ponytail warrior agreed, seeing a future advantage in it. Harashide looked at them both, grateful for their unwavering loyalty, and the new party of three sprinted off into the darkness. She took command, stating their primary goal was rescue, not combat, and Harashide shouted his understanding of the plan. The ponytail warrior gave him a quick nod of thanks, telling him not to worry about it, when a sudden flash of movement caught their attention. The team arrived on the scene, shocked by what they saw, as the chamber floor was completely and utterly destroyed, with the bodies of defeated warriors scattered everywhere, and even a massive monster lying broken among the rubble. They could only stare at the scene of absolute devastation, where a single girl stood over the carnage, smiling, holding a defeated knight by the head, before slamming him violently into the stone floor. An act of brutality Harashide couldn't believe he was seeing, as he felt an overwhelming and terrifying pressure emanate from her. The girl scoffed and tossed something their way, which landed with a heavy, sickening thud. It was the knight's severed, still-armored arm, his shattered helmet lying uselessly nearby. The schoolgirl cried out the knight's name in horror, while Harashide and the ponytail warrior shouted in pure rage, and he immediately used his appraisal skill to assess the threat. The results were terrifying. She was a white-silver dragon. Her level an impossible, unbelievable 241, a level of power unlike anything they had ever felt before. She dismissed the slain monster as a mere toy, the red-haired warrior scoffing at such a tedious fight. A memory surfaced of someone calling her weak, and atop the fallen monster the blonde girl despaired. The young archer looked on, confused by her strange words, while the swordsman realized she was no ordinary foe. She laughed maniacally, mocking his simple assumption, her eyes shifting, becoming reptilian as she declared, "I am this dungeon's master." A dark, corrupting power exploded from her body, her form twisting into something truly monstrous, and the party could only stare in absolute shock. As in her place a colossal white dragon appeared, looming over them, its eyes searching for someone specific. The dragon demanded the swordsman reveal his true power, as a shadowy specter manifested right behind him, a revelation that left his teammates completely stunned. The dragon smashed the ground with a mighty earth-shaking roar, its massive eye watching them, unblinking and ancient. As a claw shattered the stone floor with ease, the beast seemed intrigued by what it was seeing. The swordsman pulled the archer to safety, asking if she was okay as she quickly thanked him, before a new challenger leaped toward the beast, the red-haired warrior attacking with her blade held high, meeting its powerful gaze with a defiant, fearless grin. The dragon seemed amused by her sheer audacity. The red-haired warrior unleashed a furious dragon dance attack, diving from above to strike the beast's powerful neck, while the archer fired a volley of crackling lightning arrows, which exploded harmlessly against the dragon's chest. Harushig moved in from the ground, his own sword ready, preparing a flying slash to support the attack, but the sheer scale of the beast was overwhelming, and his attack failed to even leave a mark. The horned girl laughed, delighted by their desperate struggle. As the warrior realized her best move had been utterly useless, and the archer stared in utter paralyzing shock, defeated Harashide dropped to his knees in the dust, whispering that this was all his fault, that trying to save Lyon had put everyone in grave danger. When a voice called out to him, the warrior asked how long he would need to tame their enemy, and he told her they just needed to buy him some time, but he knew it was a losing battle, and he couldn't let them die for his mistake. But the warrior said they were here by their own choice, and the archer promised they would all return home safely. They stood with him, ready to fight and die for his plan, leaving Harashide stunned by their unwavering faith in him, his hand clenched into a tight, determined fist. As he accepted their resolve, his own hardening like steel, he made a grim, desperate calculation. 3 minutes was all they had. On his signal, the team charged forward as one, their target a blonde girl mocking their futile resolve. The swordswoman shouted his name, ready to execute the plan, and the archer echoed her cry, trusting him completely. From the back of the formation, Harashide reached out his hand, unleashing his unique dominate ability. The power surged through the blonde girl, but her shock quickly twisted into a wicked, knowing grin as her form began to shift violently, and dark reptilian scales erupted across her body. transforming her into a massive, terrifying dragon. Harashige held his ground, sweat beading on his brow. As the beast towered over them, identifying him as the tamer, it unleashed a devastating beam of pure energy, a blast that carved a deep trench in the stone floor, its cold reptilian eye locking onto him. In a flash, Harashige was clinging to its head, completing the taming and thanking his new powerhouse. The dragon, now a powerful ally, stood with the two women, and they turned ready to face their next opponent. The archer took her stance before a shimmering defensive ward. The plan had worked. They bought the 3 minutes he needed. And now their new weapon was ready for battle. A magic-infused arrow flew straight and true, but its target was another massive dragon. The beast's eye tracked the incoming projectile, and the arrow simply glanced off its tough armored scales. Enraged, the dragon smashed the surrounding ruins. The ponytail swordswoman leaped into the fray, facing the beast head-on, preparing her blade. Her sword cut deep into its neck, and the dragon roared, wounded but far from beat. The archer provided support from a safe distance, her explosion arrow detonating on impact. The swordswoman landed on a pillar, observing the fight, dodging a sudden blinding blast of smoke. In this extreme state, her body began to move faster, and she felt a new power coursing through her veins. Her hands tightened around her katana's hilt. As she prepared to unleash her full ability, a powerful slash cut cleanly through the air, and the smoke from her attack began to clear. Her eyes widened in disbelief at what she saw. A grinning blonde girl stood where the dragon had been, and the swordswoman realized it had taken human form. The girl taunted her, a scaly hand flexing with power, and she was hit before she could even react. A devastating punch shattered the ground beneath her. The schoolgirl screamed for her fallen comrade, but a shadowy voice warned her not to look away. A bandaged fist flew through the air toward her. The blow connected with a brutal, sickening impact, and dark fluid dripped to the cold stone floor. She choked, stunned by the sudden searing pain. The creature stood over her victims, calling them pathetic. From behind a pillar, a new fighter emerged, recognizing the two girls lying helpless on the ground. The villain turned, ready for her next opponent. The schoolgirl lay broken on the cracked tiles, her friend the red-haired fighter also down and defeated, her katana laying uselessly beside her. As she realized her true power never even had a chance to activate, the monster wondered aloud if the schoolgirl was still alive. And a faint pained gasp was the only answer. The red-haired fighter saw this small sign of life. As the schoolgirl whispered a promise to her sister that she would return, her vision blurred, focusing on her defeated friend. A memory flashed through the fighter's mind. She remembered that she once had a brother, a powerful explorer who was trusted by everyone. He had found her once when she was lost inside a dangerous dungeon, a younger her apologizing for needing his help. His face had been filled with a quiet, profound sadness. A flashback to a simpler, happier time. Her brother had promised to always protect her, and she followed in his footsteps, becoming an explorer herself. But he fell, protecting her from a vicious monster, his dying words only for her safety. Her entire world collapsed in that single moment. She cried, blaming her own weakness for his death, and swore to become stronger than anyone else, to honor the life he had given for her. In the present, Sakurako stood battered but unbroken. The horned villain smirked, impressed she was still standing. Her hand rested on her family's ancestral blade, and she drew her katana with grim, solemn purpose. The chained man Harashige called out her name, and in him she saw her brother's kindness, the same selflessness of someone protecting others. She remembered he has a family waiting for him, that these two were people she must not fail, and she made a silent vow, "I will protect you." Sakurako lunged forward with everything she had left, her expression one of pure cold determination. The ground cracked under the sheer force of her dash. While the villain watched with a sadistic, eager grin, Sakurako released her full, unrestrained power. Unleashing her ultimate attack, Cherry Blossom Wind, the swordswoman drove her blade forward, but her opponent revealed monstrous, inhuman fangs, her skin hardening like iron against the steel. She caught the blade with her bandaged hands, a crazed smile spreading across her face. The swordswoman cried out in shock and disbelief. As the blade pierced through, spraying a black fluid, she stared back, splattered but resolute. The monster taunted her, clearly enjoying the fight, her body erupting in a grotesque transformation. The swordswoman's eyes narrowed with intense focus, when suddenly a projectile flew through the air. A spear impaled the monster straight through the jaw, and in the distance a new challenger appeared. The schoolgirl vowed to protect her fallen ally. The monster glared, enraged by the interruption, claiming such a shallow wound would never stop her. With one hand she snapped the weapon's shaft in two, but a sudden realization hit her. A new warrior had rescued the swordswoman from her grasp, and he looked at the monster and said, "Time's up."